Hi, I'm Darius Spearman, and you're watching African Elements. Music has been a fundamental part of African and African American expression, tying together different elements of culture. In this episode, we look at how African music transcended the Atlantic slave trade and how elements of African music became infused into the antebellum slave plantations of the southern United States, becoming the foundation of black music in America today. All that coming up. Welcome back to African Elements. If you're new to this channel, we create educational content for higher ed and make it accessible to the masses. That's possible largely thanks to my Patreon contributors who support this program. You can join them at the link below in the description for as little as $1 a month and receive access to ad-free content and exclusive videos and materials available only to Patreon members. Otherwise, to support this program, drop a like and subscribe and comment below if you'd like to see more of this content. With that out of the way, let's jump in. As we saw previously, culture can be understood as beliefs, practices, and modes of being of a particular people in a particular setting, adopted as a means of survival. Religion was a key part of African cultural life. West African religion in particular was believed to be infused with the music of life force and the natural beat. West African culture and music also became critical survival tools in the Americas. The rhythms of African music survived the transatlantic slave trade, appearing in the stylings of African American music. Specifically, sophisticated elements of offbeat rhythms found in African music emerged in the spirituals of the antebellum South, where music was played around the beat instead of on it, giving the feeling of the music surrounding the beat. The prison work songs recorded in the 1930s at Angola State Prison in Louisiana retain that feature. Historically, music has been an integral component of African and African American culture, manifesting in modes of worship, medicinal practices, ceremony, and in maintaining connections to our roots. Along with their culture, Africans who were taken to the Americas as slaves retained their musical constructs, rhythms, and even instruments. As such, elements of African music can be found in the slave plantations in the United States during the 18th and 19th centuries, where they reveal themselves in spirituals and the blues, which included cross rhythms and call and response techniques that were features of their African musical heritage.
Gospel music started in the field as slave songs and work songs, songs that many of you know, and people sing even with bands and so forth and so on today. But the slave wasn't allowed to sing in its natural tone, which would have been something like Chosa losa, pues something like that. They weren't allowed to. So they couldn't sing in their natural language or their native tone, so they were forced to sing like the people at the big house, where they would hear things like De vieni alla finestra, o mio tesoro. So what happened is it changed. It changed into things like, Go lay down my burdens down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside. Oh, stay warm no more.
The folk songs of Southern blacks emphasize the offbeat phrasing of percussion, along with the call and response phrasing typical of African music that became known as spirituals. Among the basic elements of African music that contributed to the creation of spirituals, at least 4 basic features of African music are found in African American sacred and secular musical styles. The complex rhythms or metronome sense, the dominance of the percussion, the offbeat phrasing of melodic accents, and the overlapping call and response patterns. In music, call and response works similarly to a conversation, where, in a combination of 2 distinct phrases, the first phrase serves as the call,
Gonna lay down my burden.
And the second phrase is the direct answer. Call and response became a fundamental feature of the spiritual that provided a pathway for African Americans to encode their stories. Their songs often focused on the book of Exodus and the story of deliverance from slavery in Egypt. This focus was a product of the infusion of Christian piety in the slave experience for persons of African descent, but it was just as much an expression of resistance that belied their literal desire for freedom underneath the metaphorical biblical passage. The use of cross rhythms, or conflicting rhythms occurring at the same time, was also a persistent characteristic found in African and African American music, and was often found in spiritual. Another musical style incorporated into African American music, the hot musical style, contained more compelling and driving rhythms and became a central part of the spiritual. It relied on the rhythms of each instrument or voice being steady and reliable, maintaining their own time signature. Use of the voice as the hot element in the spiritual provided the component that inspired a connection to God through music. The drum rhythms in hot music are reliable and steady, while the musical rhythms fall on a syncopated beat. The use of these cross rhythms along with the percussive instrument results in an abundance of musical accents, all of which are African features that have been consistently maintained in African American music. As we can see, spirituals contain many rhythmic elements preserved from their African heritage. Offbeat phrasing and call and response were two often incorporated components. The other musical type that developed among African Americans in the 19th century was the blues. Gerhard Kubrick identified musical traits from two different parts of Africa which he suggested contributed to the blues. The first was the ancient Negritic style from West Africa, which incorporated a lamenting song style accompanied by repetitive motions and the sound of manual labor. The repetitive motions produced a swinging rhythm that was later typical of the blues. The other style identified by Kubrick was the Arab Islamic song style from the people of the West Sudanic belt. The Arab Islamic style was a combination of voice and instrument, often with the instrument complementing the voice in a call and response style, similar to blues, and also incorporated the bent or pitch-altered notes also found in the blues. Additionally, the familiar 12-bar blues style incorporates elements of both Negritic and Arab Islamic styles. Each of the 4 beats in the 4 bars might be repeated, bent, broken, or ignored. The vocals start at a relatively high pitch, then descend with the rhythm being slow and having a swing of the Negritic style, while the instruments and vocals create a musical call and response similar to the Arab Islamic song style. Both the Arab Islamic call and response style and the swing of the Negritic style, along with the interaction of voice and instrument as seen from the people of the West Sudanic belt, helped bring an element of African music into the blues. The call and response in blues was typically between the vocal and the instrumental parts of the music, blending in such a way as if the two voices were carrying the melodies instead of one. So in summary, the music of Africa was an element of life that enslaved Africans brought to the Americas. In the southern United States, the spiritual with the call and response and percussive offbeat phrasing provided a continuity with the religious music of Africa. In later years, the blues incorporated not just the call and response musical style from Africa, but also the slow swing rhythm, bringing the vocal and instrumental rhythms together in harmony. The musical styles of the spirituals and the blues kept a part of the African heritage alive for their descendants in the Americas, leaving a profound impact on American music. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to support this content further, there's a link to my Patreon page in the description below. I'm Darius Spearman, and until next time, I'll see you in the comments.